Greetings friends, Jawless Paul here. I started playing Soulstone Survivors a couple months ago and it hooked me pretty hard. There's a lot to experiment with and things can get insanely challenging and fun at higher difficulty and as you buff your skills. Here are some tips that I wish I had known about when I started and will jumpstart your progress into the game. Something I discovered when I was playing early on is that using higher difficulty through curses helps you level up very quickly. Because of that, it's a good idea to increase the difficulty of the runs through curses or by taking the red portal after you finish a stage. Don't be afraid to pump up the curse level a bit, as you will get a ton of bonus experience and it will be required to unlock some of the characters and runes. There are certain curses to be aware of, especially the ones that increase the number of lords that are summoned. These can be difficult to handle until you are a bit more familiar with the game. Don't neglect defense. Initially, I thought that all you wanted was to get damage and defenses were worthless. However, that is not exactly the case. And certain defensive abilities are critical if you want to stay alive in this game. The most important defensive stat is your number of dashes, followed by movement speed. There will come a point where you will need multiple dashes to get out of the danger zone. You can unlock a second dash here in the skill tree, and certain characters come with extra dodges. Dodging is much better than building up armor and block because there aren't as many sources of healing in the game. Better to avoid damage altogether by dashing. Another tip with that, and perhaps more important than your movement speed or your number of dashes, is this rune here. This rune makes your dashes go much farther, about the distance of 2 dashes each now. At only 1 point cost, this is a very solid rune choice. In order to unlock it, you need to use all the curses up through tier 2 on the frozen wasteland. I would beeline to that as quickly as possible. Trust me, this rune is that good. As for other runes, there are a lot of great options and it depends on what class you choose, what skills you plan to focus on, etc. However, the dash rune is the most essential defensive rune. I don't do any runs without it anymore, other than with the Death Knight, which has no dashes. These runes up at the top are free, so find out what you need to do to unlock them as soon as possible, as they provide a huge amount of benefit. The 3 I want to mention are Weapon Mastery, which gives you 2 starting skills in each run, depending on the weapon you have equipped. This is a nice way to jumpstart your runs with a lot more damage, and some of the weapons are incredible. Efficient Extraction gives you bonus resources, which is great when you're trying to collect enough to build the new weapons. Finally, Reroll Mastery gives you a free reroll every 10 levels. So that's a thought about defenses, but what about offense? There are so many choices for abilities and different types of builds. I'm not ready to start ranking the abilities I've used, but I do have a few general rules of thumb that I usually follow. And I'll share a list of skills that I've found to be very, very good. Buffs. So starting with buffs that you generally want to prioritize. Buffs that affect all skills rather than buffs that affect individual skills, especially at the start. Once you've been playing for a few minutes, you'll start to see trends for which skills are doing the most damage and start to pump those up. I've also started prioritizing cast frequency and multicasting a lot more than flat damage increase. Cast frequency can be one of the best things to increase simply because hitting enemies more means you're doing more damage and applying more of the critical debuffs. Not only that, but they synergize so much with each other. More casts means more chances to multicast. After cast frequency and multicast, I look to improve crit and crit damage. It's very possible to get extremely high crit chance in this game, and the damage improvements apply to every skill you have. Additionally, you can increase the amount of damage done by crits, effectively boosting the damage on all skills. After those stats, I look to increase raw damage and area. Most area skills already have a decent area size, but increasing that will pump up the total damage potential quite a bit since it can hit many more enemies on the screen. I should also mention that you should level up one character until they get their special ability. These special abilities can do a lot to make your character stronger. You'll have to level up through the skill tree before you can see the characters and start unlocking their special abilities. So, you know how I mentioned checking skills partway through a run to see what your heavy hitters are? You might want to consider ditching some of the other abilities that aren't providing as much utility and replacing them with buffing abilities like Might, Bloodlust, and Arcane Power. Doing so will pump up the abilities that are already performing. Consider this: if you do 10k damage per second with one ability and 5k with another, a 50% damage buff brings one to 15k and the other to 7.5k. You've gained much more with the 10k damage skill, so it's better to prioritize those later in the run. This is something that I check regularly. Okay, so how about skills? Well, I've found a bunch of different skills that I like, and it's hard to pick just a few. I will say though that the summon tag units are much better than they have any right to be. I often find that the Chaos Golems have the highest DPS and total damage of all my abilities, so in addition to tanking tons of damage and keeping me alive, they are hitting enemies like trucks. That goes for a lot of the summon abilities. They tend to deal a lot more damage than their direct cast counterparts. I'm not sure if that is a bug or if that is working as intended. In the meantime, you should try and unlock the Beastmaster and Necromancer as early as you can so you can take advantage of the increased minion damage. Additionally, I've seen a lot of success with lightning abilities. This is because they are extremely high damage abilities, and combined with their debuffs increase your crit chance as well. I also want to mention the chaos abilities. These abilities are a little weird because they have a huge range of possible damage. However, they are often the abilities doing the most damage, and not only that, but the chaos effect of possibly setting off your other abilities just seems too good to pass up. Also, if you like chaos abilities like me, you should use this rune. It rolls the damage twice and picks the higher of the two. Very handy. Okay, that does it for my first thoughts on tactics for this game. What do you think? What are some of the handy tips you found during your playtime? Leave a comment below. Alright, we'll catch you in the next one. Adios.